So, hello Matrix Live, this is Tib. I'm taking over Matrix Live. This is the first issue you should be seeing with me, but I'm going to do the following as well. Today I'm with Dennis. Hi, Dennis.
Hi.
We're going to talk about a vulnerability disclosure that Element disclosed on Monday. Hopefully, you heard about that one. Dennis is going to talk about it in more detail. That vulnerability is about key sharing, so you can read about the full disclosure on matrix.org/blog if you want to find the blog post. Dennis, my very first question is, what is key sharing? How does it work? And why is it needed in the first place in the Matrix protocol?
Right. Okay. Matrix, as we all hopefully know, supports end-to-end encryption, which means some rooms are encrypted, which operationally means that when a sender sends a message, it doesn't send it in plain text so that everyone can read it, but it actually encrypts it with a message key and only then sends it. But so that the other participants can actually read the contents instead of just junk, it also has to uh, get that key into their hands, so to speak. And this is what key sharing is. It's a mechanism by which your, for instance, phone or laptop can share the key, the message key of the message you sent to other participants of the room. And well, when talking about key sharing, there are actually two separate but related mechanisms. One is the proactive one, which you use when you actually send a message, so you proactively share the key. But there's also a way that other devices can request the key from you. And the first one is actually necessary because encryption wouldn't work without it. But the second one is kind of used to paper over some edge cases and bugs which creep in into the implementation inevitably whenever something as complex as this is. So for many reasons, it can turn out that even though a participant should have gotten the key, they don't get it. And so there's this mechanism by which they can say, hey, please give me the key for this message. And
Is this
uh,
the message we can see sometimes in Element that says you don't have the key, you can ask to reshare the key to another session?
that's exactly it.
Okay,
But this can also happen automatically
okay.
at some points, yes. Uh, so basically, eventually we would love to remove this ability or at least make it a bit more manual when you decide to reshare the key in this way, but for now it works automatically. And there are basically two cases in which your device, the sending device, should reshare the key upon such a request. And this is when the requesting device is actually one of your own devices, which is verified to be your own, or it was one of the devices that was in the room when the message was originally sent into the room. So you're one of the devices that was supposed to get the key. And this check turned out to be vulnerable. Basically, the check that ensures that it's the same device, it could be fooled through because there was a logic error in the code.
Okay, so how does it translate from an end user perspective if I'm not really interested in how Matrix works, etc., and I just want to use it to chat? Um, how is it a problem for me?
That's reasonable. Uh, it's a problem for you because whenever there are devices in the same room from multiple home servers, in this case, this vulnerability would have allowed each one of those home servers, if their admins were malicious, for instance, it would allow them to steal the keys and listen in on the conversation if one of the vulnerable devices was present in the room.
Okay, so it means end-to-end encryption is pretty much defeated. There is no longer secrecy, and home server administrator can steal the keys and read the conversation.
There are some limitations to that. They can't really do it in all cases. I won't go deeper into that now. You can read the blog post if you're interested. But yes, it does defeat encryption in those cases when the clients were vulnerable. But luckily, it's all patched now, so it shouldn't be a problem anymore.
Okay, but and talking about that, about everything patched, there was a pre-disclosure, and it's quite a sensitive vulnerability. So why not just telling everyone as soon as you discover the vulnerability, because it's pretty important. It's need to be fixed quickly.
Yeah, that's a good question. And there are basically two primary viewpoints, philosophies on this. One of those is called full disclosure, and this is basically what you just suggested. Just when you find a vulnerability, just dump it on everyone, share the details, no reasons against that. But this does have some advantages. You can't, for instance, get bogged down into deciding who should you pre-share the vulnerability information with, whether that party will be able to uphold the secrecy around it until the disclosure date and so forth. So there's a lot of trouble with that, and you can avoid all that by just sharing immediately. But there are also significant disadvantages because the window from when the information is public to when everyone is patched is far longer because it takes time to understand the vulnerability, prepare patches, contact downstream packagers, and so on. And this particular vulnerability, once you know what's up, once you know what's going on, you can pretty easily exploit it. It's not very complex exploit if you're in a position to do so, like a malicious home server admin. So we wanted to minimize this window, and we took this other approach, which goes by various different names, but one of them is responsible disclosure, which is basically to we took it upon ourselves to compile a list of all the crypto implementations in Matrix and do an audit on each one of them to ensure whether they actually implement key sharing, and if they do, whether they are vulnerable. And I should mention Damir Jelic, who is his nickname is Poljar, who works on the Matrix Rust SDK. He was an immense help in this, in verifying many of the implementations. Um, and basically, we audited each implementation, determined ones that were vulnerable, then contacted them, worked with the developers of those projects to patch it, and finally coordinated that everyone has a package ready once the disclosure date was due.
Okay, that must have been quite a bit of work because there are a few implementations in the wild. Um, was the issue an implementation problem or was it a specification problem? I mean, is it Matrix per se which is vulnerable, or is it the way that Matrix was implemented?
Uh, the specification itself was correct. It specifies the correct thing to do. But it turned out that one of the implementations, which was the original one, got this wrong. And then other people basically uh, either copied it or made the same mistake when thinking about it. But that's a good pointer that something, even though the specification is technically correct, it could be improved so that uh, people don't misimplement this so many times. So we'll definitely take a look at the guide for implementing end-to-end encryption to improve it, to point out this case explicitly so that it doesn't happen again.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. So as the next step, we are going to fix the specification. Is there anything else that needs to be done for now?
Well, nothing that needs to be done per se, but there are some additional steps that we are considering, and one of those is placing a larger emphasis on the Rust SDK of which Damir Jelic is the primary author, which I mentioned earlier. Um, it would serve as a kind of portable reference implementation so that it well each time you have a single component for something, you can spend more time auditing it, ensuring it's correct, and then we can point people, besides reading the spec and the guides, you can also look at this implementation. And if you don't have the time or resources to re-implement this horribly tricky thing, you don't actually have to do it. You can also use the Rust SDK. But if you do want to re-implement it, you have an example of how it should be done. So we're hoping to like place a larger emphasis on the Rust SDK as in that direction, and uh, the effort for Element Android to switch over to using the Rust SDK for the crypto side of things is already underway, and we should be seeing results from that soon, I think.
Okay, yes, it's not the first time I've heard that implementing your own crypto is not often a good idea. So it's nice to have a reference implementation. And I have another question for you. Um, not everyone might be interested in everything posted to the matrix.org blog. Do we have a way to refine something, a mailing list or something for security, maybe a feed for people to subscribe?
Yes, we actually added the feed just a couple of days ago. So there's a blog category called security, but there wasn't a way to get an RSS feed for just that particular category. So basically, you just take the URL when you're visiting that category on the blog, matrix.org, category security something, and then you add slash feed at the end. And this is what we'll be using to publish any important advisories or anything security related. And we've already began relaying that URL to interested parties and packagers and so forth so that they can actually listen in and get the news promptly without us having to email them and so on.
Okay, perfect. Well, Dennis, thanks a lot for your answers. That was very constructive. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a great chat, and see you again sometimes, perhaps.
See
Bye.
you.